What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today I will be reviewing A Quiet Place Part 2. It was directed once again by John Krasinski, and it also once again stars Emily Blunt, Millicent Simmons, Noah Jupe, and featuring in this film, Cillian Murphy. Directly after the events of A Quiet Place, the Abbott family must venture out into the open world, and in doing so realize that the blind monsters who hunt by sound are not the only threat that this post-apocalyptic world has to offer. I finally saw this movie, guys. I tried very hard to see it while it was in theaters, and it still is in some theaters, but I did not get a chance to see it. However, it was recently given premiere access on Paramount Plus, and it was also available to buy for $20 on Amazon. So instead of setting up a subscription, like a whole subscription thing for Paramount Plus, I just paid $20 on Amazon, and I own this thing in Ultra HD now. Now, obviously, yes, it's not actual Ultra HD, and I'm still going to buy the 4K UHD. That's a whole nother conversation, but the point is, I finally saw this film. If you have not yet seen my review for the first film, I did review that film. I love it. It's one of my favorite modern-day horror films. I gave it an A. And so naturally, A Quiet Place Part 2 was one of my most anticipated films of recent years, and easily one of my most anticipated sequels of all time. And there was no reason for me to be worried about it, other than the fact that it was a sequel to a film that means a lot to me. But it still has all the same talent: John Krasinski, Emily Blunt, Millicent Simmons, Noah Jupe, and also Cillian Murphy being added onto it. There was no reason for me to think that this film would be bad. And now that I've finally seen A Quiet Place Part 2, what can I say about it? Well, I can say that A Quiet Place Part 2 is one of the best horror sequels ever made. This film does not suffer from any sequel overload. It does not have a case of sequelitis in any sense of the word. It is simple and to the point. And the opening 10 minutes of this movie, probably my favorite sequence in all existing A Quiet Place media. It's not all done in one take, but there are parts of it that are done in very long takes. And also, you really feel the weight of the first film's climax looming over every single thing that happens in this movie, because the climax of the first film, pretty traumatizing and very scarring and very emotionally powerful. They knew that when they were going into the second one, if it was going to take place directly after that, you can't just forget about that, because in the chronology of the A Quiet Place lore, like, A Quiet Place Part 2 is literally taking place moments after the climax at the end of the first film. And where a lot of directors with a sequel would think that they don't have to worry about character development because they already had a whole first film that got audiences to care about the characters, and now they can just go crazy with the sequel. Krasinski is smart. He knows, no, we can't just abandon character development, because one of the reasons my first film was so successful was because of the emotional weight of it. So I'm not just going to strip the sequel of emotional weight. No, we're going to have all the same emotional weight, also add some new stuff in there, particularly with Cillian Murphy's character. And I really loved that. He didn't think that just because we care about these characters that he didn't have to include development. He did, and there are some very powerful arcs. This film is perfect from a directorial and visual standpoint. The way it is shot, the way it is edited, the sound design, all of it is top-tier horror filmmaking. And where the first film was more of like a straight-up horror movie, this is more of like a horror thriller. It's not as much like a horror movie as the first film was, because this feels like a more open world situation, and it's constantly suspenseful throughout, and it's one of the best thrillers in recent years. Which is actually a good segue into my next point. See, the first film was very suspenseful and very tense and very quiet, hence the title. But this film actually introduces a very exhilarating sense of movement and adrenaline. There aren't so many, like, creeping around hallways type scenes in this movie as there are action sequences, and some taking place in very claustrophobic locations. It also features fantastic performances. Once again, Emily Blunt, Millicent Simmons, and Noah Jupe are fantastic, particularly Simmons and Blunt. Look, I know people tend to look down on genre films, especially when it comes to award season, but, like, put the context of the movie aside and just look at the performance on these actors' faces, because much of this film, just like the first film, isn't really reliant on dialogue. There is more dialogue in this film because, you know, they found ways that they can communicate verbally, but there's still many scenes where these actors just have to show emotion and what they want to say purely with their faces. and they did a phenomenal job. It's very emotional throughout. As I said, you're still feeling the weight of the climax throughout everything in this movie, but Cillian Murphy's character, who actually has a very substantial role in the film, there's a lot of depth given to him, and I genuinely felt for this guy, which I didn't think I would, because I love the first film so much, and I'm so attached to those characters, that going into this film, I didn't think that they'd be able to get me to care about a new character being introduced in the sequel, but surprisingly they did. And this film masterfully executes the inherent emotion, the inherent feeling of melancholy that comes with a post-apocalyptic world and thinking like what could have been, but also seeing kind of the beauty of cities being overtaken by wildlife and things like that. That's a beautiful sight, despite, the melancholia that comes with it. It's a very complex emotion, and it's what draws me into so many dystopian-like post-apocalyptic stories. If I had to think of one issue I had with the movie, there's really only one thing I can think of, and I'm not even sure if I'm gonna take off points for it, because looking back, I don't know if I would have taken any scenes out of the movie, but I'll still mention it. The end of the second act and then moving into the third act, the transition there's a little bit of a lull there. Like, it's not bad, it's still quality, very well directed, but I just felt the pacing kind of strained just for a very brief section of screen time during the transition from the second act into the third act. Besides that, I loved this movie. Now, one thing I feel like people are going to be divided on is the ending, and I will say, I would have liked if we had one more scene, but it's not a flaw for me that we didn't get one more scene, because you know what's gonna it's kind of like the end of the first film where some people are like, oh, I just would have liked to seen a little more, but like, at the end of the first film, you know what's gonna happen. Another complaint I heard about it is that some people feel that it was just very obviously setting up A Quiet Place Part 3. That's the one complaint that I actually don't really get. I don't see how it was doing that. I guess the only way that it could really be interpreted as doing that is because we didn't get one more scene that gave us a little bit more resolution. Like, it's not like the ending we got was ambiguous, it just cuts to black and the credits start rolling just a little bit before you would expect it to, and so people are left feeling like, oh, but there should be more, and then therefore maybe feel like, oh, so it's just setting up A Quiet Place Part 3. But when I was watching it, I didn't feel that at all. I wasn't feeling like, okay, so they're gonna make a third one. Like, I didn't feel that at all. And I will say, in spite of that, I would love for there to be a third one. I think that this could easily become one of the best modern-day horror franchises ever. With Part 1 and 2 already being this good, I am more than open to Part 3 as long as Krasinski comes back as writer and director, and Blunt is set to star, same with Simmons and Jupe, and I would love to see Cillian Murphy back as well. I am just so happy that this movie was as good as it was. If this movie had sucked, it just would have tarnished the impact of the original, but gratefully, with Krasinski as writer and director and these stars, it was great. In the end, A Quiet Place Part 2 is a very exhilarating, very adrenaline-pumping, suspenseful thrill ride of a movie, and I have absolutely no hesitation in giving it an A+. So guys, A Quiet Place Part 2, have you seen it? What did you think about it? Comment below and let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And also, what do you think of the first film? Look forward to my review of Season 2 of Beastars. I'm really looking forward to that. Also, a spoiler review for Season 1 of Beastars. And also, a review for the Netflix miniseries that came out last year, The Queen's Gambit. Yeah, I have quite a few videos to make. Thanks so much for watching, guys. It really does mean a lot. I'll see you in the next video, and until then, keep writing, keep shooting, and keep editing.